back then, and I'm not trying to say how long ago it was, but back then it was probably not something you could dream of having a 30-year career in pro sports as a female, right? So how does it happen that you grow up as a kid and the dream grows in you to be a professional athlete when it wasn't that much of a done thing back then?
Well, for me, I was born in a family of faith. So I was raised with all the, I guess what people call now life coaching, creating a vision, speaking things into existence. All of that was derived from the Bible. Write the vision, make it plain. So that's how I was raised. My father raised me that way. So I actually, the first time I picked up a basketball and I started playing, I immediately fell in love with it and I started writing that down as my goal. Like I was going to go to college and I was going to play pro. It is very weird coming up during that time. I watched the NBA with my dad and my brothers. There were no women leagues around to watch, but I don't know. I just stuck with it. And my dad was always like supporting us and believing in us. So he didn't discredit it.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember. I'm remembering as you described that my own backyard battles with my younger sister, who also had her eyes on being a professional athlete. But for her, it moved on to different things. And we used to talk about the NBA and whether she could play in the NBA. And
Right.
did you watch the NBA with that in mind? Like you thinking you were going to play against those guys, or what was the dream?
I never dreamed that I would play in the NBA. I just always had a feeling that they would have a women's professional league by the time I grew up. I just never let go of that dream. Maybe because I was from a small town and I was super naive, but it's just, I don't know if you not trying to compare myself to big time celebrities, but if you ever talk to them and hear their stories, they were just they had a knack for believing in something they really couldn't see and just
Right.
sticking to it. And so
Right.
that was my thing. It was always in the back of my mind. I laid up at night dreaming about it. So it was just my thing.
This is a question we ask all the guests. I'm going to jump straight to it for you because you've touched on one of the semi-common answers there. And the question is, how do you define toughness? So you've had a career across, obviously a super successful, one of the greatest of all time in your college career, decade plus in the WNBA. You're now coaching at the highest level. You've seen a lot. And I'm curious if that's what you would describe as toughness, in the ability to see something that doesn't exist yet. Is that, and hang on to it and persist even though there's no reason why that should come to be? Or is it something else to you?
No, I do think toughness starts with being a visionary because at first you have to have a goal. You have to have a vision for what you want for your life, and that's in anything. But obviously, there's different traits and that's where toughness comes in to achieving that vision. And it takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of perseverance. It takes being adaptable, being flexible. And it takes the discipline to do the things you don't want to do in order to have what you want. It takes the discipline to say no to the things that will make you less than your best. So that's what toughness is to me. But to be tough, you have to have a sense of mental toughness, physical toughness to reach that vision.
Yeah, you mentioned physical toughness there, which is a great jumping off point into this story, which for our listeners, any of our listeners who follow the WNBA or women's basketball, you've probably heard this story. If you haven't, then I'm going to put a little warning here. You might get squeamish as we relate this tale. Chasity, you had a horrendous injury during your career that would probably sit most people down for the rest of their lives. They may not get involved in any physical contact. You not only recovered from the injury and returned playing, it's something that you've spoken about a little bit before, but can you talk us through that injury? I'm not even going to spoil it with a leader, but can you describe just that day going into that game, what happened to you and how that has built your toughness potentially moving forward, or whether it just revealed what was already there?
It was just a really freaky accident. Actually, I was playing for the Chicago Sky, and as most often, guards try to come steal the ball from the post players. And I was actually on the block, and I was going into my offensive move, and the guard was coming around trying to steal it. But instead of intercepting the pass, she stuck her fingers went in my eye and dislocated my eyeball. Yes.
Oof. So I even know the story, but even as you describe it there, I'm like squirming. For people who can't see, I'm squirming on the screen. I'm like closing my eyes because even just the thought of having anyone who's been poked in the eye, playing a sport, it's not fun. But it's next level. They dislocated your eyeball out of the socket.
Yeah, so the way the doctor explained it to me is that it's just like dislocating your finger because she pushed it. So basically, if you burst all the muscles and they're just stretched to a certain extent, but obviously you can't lose your eye. Like it's not gonna, but it's just like dislocated as far as it can go because the muscles are still hanging on, but they're just all stretched. So
Yeah.
it's basically dislocated. Yeah.
And so what's your awareness at that moment? You're clearly something's wrong. You've been poked in the eye, you're probably grabbing it. But are you aware that this is not a normal poke in the eye? Are you feeling, holy shit, there might be some real damage here?
Oh, yeah. For me, definitely. I was very blessed. I didn't have a lot of injuries playing. So my teammates, the game didn't even stop because I rarely fall. If I get hurt, I twist my ankle or whatever, I keep playing. I was from the old school generation, so it had to be something serious if I went down. So they kept playing, and then my teammate recognized I didn't get back, and they saw me laying on the floor because it was basically like a boxer. I basically blacked out. And so then they rushed back to me because you couldn't see it. Like the ref didn't call a foul. It was just like a freaky play.
So you didn't even get a foul.
I didn't even get a foul. The play was not stopped. Yeah.
Holy smokes. Wow.
Yeah,
and so then, and then you're out of the rest of the game, I assume. And so the doctor assesses, tells you what's going on with your eye. That's a pretty shocking thing to hear about something that's happened to you that could, and it's not just like, oh, I broke my bone, I'll come back. This is something that could affect you for the rest of your life. At that moment, you can't have a choice. And it may not be a conscious choice while you're a professional athlete because you always might soldier on, but there's a significant like tipping point there of do I go and do this again? How far into your career are you at this point?
That was my 9th year.
Yeah. How much extra? I read a saying, there was a quote the other day around the stuff that Simone Biles is dealing with, that it's actually a traditional Eastern philosophy teaching, but it goes something like this. Sometimes the biggest struggle we have is resisting the struggle that we currently have. And that's actually the layers of pain that we can put on ourselves. Obviously physical injury, but then starting to consider what this means and why me and how long and what else it's going to do to me. I assume that started a lot of noise in your head after that of, wow, this is like not your average injury. Is that the case? Or are you a blessed person who's able to just buckle down and go back at it?
I was just praying that I didn't have to have surgery. So for me, it was such a freaky accident. They had to call in an eye surgeon and all that. So they gave me like a steroid to help with the swelling because by the time I got to the hospital, my eye had just swollen, just shut completely. And on the way to the hospital and just sitting there, I could feel the muscles contracting and then my eye just shut completely. And so I have such a strong faith. It was just like, okay, guys, I just don't want to not be able to finish my career. I wasn't even thinking about 10 years from now or not being able to have vision in this sight, or I was just thinking, okay, contacts, okay, I still got one good eye. At the end of the day, I was just thinking of what could I control. I didn't want to end my career on a freak accident. That was just my prayer. It was just like, I just want to be able to play again. And so for me, fortunately that night, everyone was praying and it was just a lot of good energy, a lot of positive vibes. And I didn't have to have the surgery. So I was on a steroid for 2 weeks. I couldn't play. It was crazy though, because it's like one of those head injuries. So they treat it that way. Like you can't basically exercise, move. You don't even want to sneeze because then that puts more pressure around that area. So that was humbling. But once I finished the 2 weeks, my eye was still slightly shut, but I didn't have to have surgery. So it took about 4 weeks to actually fully recover from it.